Hi, I'm Joel Schrenk, voiceover talent and entrepreneur. Recently, I did a video and podcast all about listening. Now, to me, listening is one of the most important and perhaps undervalued skills that we can have. So many people aren't really that great at it and need to grow in it. And in that spirit, shortly after I did that video, I also did a lecture and training all on the topic of listening, right here in my studio for a pretty small group of people. It included my wife and my 7-month-old daughter, who refused to go to bed at the time. And so she got a couple of extra head start listening skills for her. She'll be a great listener when she grows up, I'm sure. But I thought I'd share the entire training with you here on the podcast. It's about 30 minutes long, and stick around to the end because there's a great Q&A session at the end where we really dive deeper into some of these topics. I hope you enjoy this. I've got my cup of coffee here. I hope you've got yours too. And we can sit back and once again speak easy about listening. Simplifying concepts that really help you in life, relationships, and business. This is the Speaking Easy Podcast. Decision-making is one of the many things that requires listening. As we talked about last time, conflict plays a big role in decision-making. And if I've learned anything in my marriage, it's that the successful conflict resolution requires letting the other person feel heard. Being able to listen to other people is a skill that we spend our whole lives trying to learn, but as people with our own thoughts rolling around in our heads, we just don't always get it right. I don't think it's something that we're necessarily innately good at. The number of times that Elizabeth and I have to tell our kids to listen every day is a lot. And the number of times that she had to tell me to listen before I finally kind of learned how to do it was a lot too. In fact, I had to take several master's levels counseling courses to finally figure it out, and I'm still not quite sure I have it. Now, I'm not saying you have to take master's levels counseling courses to figure out how to listen, but the point is, it's something that requires some attention. Listening is so vital for for so many things that we need to do. It's necessary in personal relationships, as you're building your relationships in your marriages, with your friends, your family, and in ministry. It's important for your work relationships with your colleagues and your coworkers because you have to be able to listen to them, right? It's important in our ministry relationships that we're building with the congregation and with our other staff members. And it's important in any kind of successful partnership where you're going to try and accomplish something. Listening is necessary for decision-making, like we talked about, because decision-making involves conflict, it involves conversation in a team or a partnership. It's important in conflict resolution, not only in decision-making, but also just when you have conflict coming up in a team, if people disagree, or if you have a congregation member who's having issues and they want to come and talk to you. It's important for accepting feedback. Again, if you have people coming up to you and they want to tell you something that they don't think you're doing right, or they want to give you some important criticism or feedback, you have to be able to listen to them and make them feel heard. And it's important in vulnerability, not vulnerability necessarily for us to other people, but for people to feel comfortable coming to talk to us because they need to be able to feel listened to. Listening is such an important skill in so many different things, and yet so many of us don't get it right. We view it as this passive skill that you kind of pick up along the way, you kind of learn about it, you get that wisdom as you're going along, and I think there's an aspect of that that's true. You kind of do learn more just the longer that you've lived about how to listen. But with more than 40% of our communication time spent listening, it's a skill that requires attention. Many times I found myself in a situation where I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm having a debate or a discussion, and they might be talking to me, but rather than actually listening to the words that are coming out of their mouth, I'm thinking, oh, what can I say back to them? I'm not 100% focused on them, right? Have you felt that? And so in order to advance our listening skills for all of these different situations, how to listen in 5 easy steps. Step number 1, attune. Now, what is attunement? We're talking about tuning a guitar or tuning our piano. We do need to tune our piano sometime. It's out of tune. But no, we're not talking about that, not for this definition of attunement. Though I did look up the Google definition of attunement, and the first definition that it gives on Google is harmonizing. Now, that's not the actual definition that we're going to be using for listening in the sense that there's a lot more to it than that. But I thought it was interesting because when we're talking about attunement, we are kind of talking about harmonizing with the other person. When we're talking about attunement with listening, we're talking about focusing 100% on the other person, giving them 100% of our attention. You're not just having those other thoughts rolling around in your head, thinking about, oh, what do I need to go buy at the store? What do I need to cook tonight? Or what am I going to say back to this person? You're just focusing 100% on them. But more than that, more than just focusing on what they're saying, you're empathizing with them. So empathy plays a very big role in attunement. In fact, you could consider attunement sort of empathetic listening. So just for the purposes of making sure that we all understand what we're talking about, because sometimes empathy or sympathy or all of those apathy words can get kind of jumbled up in our heads. What are we talking about when we're talking about empathy? Anybody who has some ideas about what you think of when you think of what is empathy?
Feeling what the other person feels.
Sure, yeah, feeling what the other person feels. I think that that's a great definition. I like to think of it as a great metaphor. Walking along, you see somebody in a hole, and you have a couple of options. What can you do? You say, wow, well, that kind of sucks that you're down in that hole, or, I can throw you a rope and you can climb up, maybe, I guess, That's not really empathizing. Empathizing is getting down with them in the hole, and you're hunkering down with them, and you're just being with them in that hole that they're in, feeling the things they're feeling and trying to gather that. And that's a big part of what attunement is. You're trying to gather, what is this person feeling? How can I kind of empathize with them while I'm listening and focused 100% on them? Now, one of the things I've found is that sometimes we don't always 100% know if we've got what the other person is feeling correct, or even if what they're saying is exactly the thing that we're hearing. Sometimes you're in a situation where somebody might say something or be feeling a certain way, and you get it totally wrong. You think, well, I thought that they were feeling kind of angry about this, and it turns out they were just kind of disappointed or something like that. So how do we know that we've got our empathetic listening correct? Well, that's where we get to step number 2, reflect. Now, we're not talking about reflections in a mirror, showing the dog a mirror, saying, I don't even know who I am anymore, right? No, we're talking about reflecting the other person, what the other person is saying, what they're feeling. And there's lots of different types of reflections. And what it's designed to do is, number 1, let the other person know that you're listening to them. Because I always say, half of listening isn't just being good at listening. It's making the other person feel like you're good at listening, making them think that you're good at listening. Now, the real pros will not really be good. They won't really be listening, but they'll make the other person think that they're listening, right? No, that's not what we should do, obviously. But it is important. The whole point of this is to let other people feel heard, right? You want them to know that you're listening to them. And apart from that, you want to make sure that you have clarity in what they're saying, that you understand what they're saying correctly, not just that it's what you're hearing isn't necessarily what they might actually be saying. So we need to reflect back to them to see, do I have this right? So going through kind of different types of reflections. Number 1, reflection of content. That's basically just paraphrasing. It'd be like, if somebody came up to me and said, oh, I lost my job today, blah, 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 talking about that. And I'd be like, oh, yeah. So, what I'm hearing you say is, that's a pretty common way to start it. What I'm hearing you say is, you lost your job today. And that's a frustrating thing for you. Okay. So it's just literally just paraphrasing, obviously not saying exactly what the person is saying back to them, but saying it in your own words to make sure you understand and to make sure that they know that you're actually listening to them. Number 2 type of reflection of feeling, or reflection of emotion. Now here, we're not talking about something that somebody has said to you where they're like, oh, I'm feeling angry. We're talking about how you're reading the person. Kind of you're looking at the person, saying somebody might come in to your office and be really frustrated. They're giving you feedback over something that they didn't think went very well at the last church service or something like that. And they're saying, oh, yeah, they're getting really all upset. And you might say, wow, I can see that you're really passionate about this. And I can see that you're really feeling kind of upset about this. Let's talk about it. You're reading how they feel. You're seeing the whole person, and you're reflecting back the emotion that you see. All right. So these first 2 are pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But again, part of it is getting it right. Sometimes you're not getting it right. Sometimes you're reflecting back and they're like, no, that's not really how I'm feeling. I'm feeling this way. And that's a point of clarification. Now and that's letting them know again that you're listening to them and you're making sure that you're clarifying as you go. The next one is a little bit more difficult. It's kind of a little bit more advanced. I like this, not too bad, but reflection of meaning, which I like to think of as being kind of combining the feeling and combining the content and then deriving some sort of conclusion that's not necessarily been spoken. So say, Joe Schmo is talking about how he's lost his job and he's really upset about that. And you can see, oh yeah, he's feeling really upset and angry. And so you might say, wow, Joe, I really see that you're feeling upset about that because you lost your job. And, it seems like you really loved your job. He may not have said that he loved his job, but you're gathering that information. You're kind of getting some meaning from the things that he's saying, the things that he's feeling. And again, you might be wrong, but I didn't love my job, but I'm just kind of upset and I'm not really sure what to do about it now. Oh, okay. So you're kind of getting some meaning from what he's saying, what he's feeling. And then the last form of reflection is a little bit more basic, actually, is just summarizing exactly what it sounds like. You do it every now and then throughout a conversation. These other types of reflections you're doing not frequently, but whenever there's a pause, you kind of, okay, so this kind of, I see, or whenever you need to clarify something, okay. When you're summarizing, oftentimes you're doing it kind of after a long stretch where you've had a lot of already, you've gotten kind of the gist of it. And again, another good way to start something like this out is like, so let me just make sure that I've got this straight up until now. And then you just go through everything that you've kind of talked about briefly, kind of in your own words, giving all of the different types of reflections that you've already talked about, just to make sure that you're on the same page. And what that does, again, apart from letting the person kind of feel heard and know that you understand them, is it also gives you an opportunity for like a segue into a different part of the conversation. If you're having this sort of a conversation in a meeting where you're trying to make some sort of decision, people are talking, they're giving their ideas, say, okay, so what I'm hearing everybody say is this, let me just make sure I've got it right. Now let's talk about maybe what I think about the situation, or let's talk about what do we need to do next? What do we need to plan for the future now that we've got all these ideas? And she's got some ideas too.
Yeah.
So that summarizing works very well in kind of mid-conversation to kind of help you segue. Obviously, kind of towards the end to just say, hey, just to make sure we understood what we talked about. It can also be useful if you're continuing a discussion at the beginning of a conversation, something that you've had, the discussions that you've had previously, just to kind of summarize what we talked about last time, and now let's go into this. So, are we at on time? Great. So, now next one, that's all of the different types of reflections. Moving on, how to listen in 5 easy steps. Step 1 was to attune. Step 2 was to reflect. Step number 3, minimally encourage, right? You can do it. I believe in you. Give encouragement. No, it's not really minimal encouragement, is it? More of the minimally encouragement we're talking about is not like, hey, you can do it. Give me some more stuff. It's more of just the small little things that you do in a conversation that you say to you, oh, okay. Yeah. Sounds kind of weird just saying it with no context, but you get the idea. You're trying to encourage people, let them know again. Half of listening is letting the other person think that you're listening to them. And this is one of the ways that they know, yeah, you're actually listening to me. And apart from just kind of giving those little vocal minimal encouragers, also think about how are you encouraging someone with your posture or your stance. You're standing here like this, like, yeah, I'm listening. No, that doesn't, having kind of open, kind of stance and leaning forward often helps too, just to kind of let the other person know that you're really paying attention to them. So that is step number 4 is minimal encourager. Step number...
No, that's 3. Yeah.
Oh, 3. Oh, thank you. So step number 4 of our how to listen in 5 steps. Step number 1 was to attune. Step number 2, to reflect. 3, minimally encourage. 4, know when to ask the right questions and when not to ask questions. So honestly, to start this off and give you kind of a spoiler alert, you want to ask as few questions as possible. Part of it, though, is asking the right kind of questions when you do need to ask questions. Now, you might have heard of the 2 different types of questions that we have. The first is a closed question. It's a type of question where it has a very definitive answer. Where are you from? I'm from Mesa, Arizona. That's it. Okay, that's the end of it. Okay, so it's very good at obtaining specific information. Sometimes really its biggest useful point, I think, when you're trying to talk to someone, actually have a conversation where you're working on listening to them, is clarification. Oh, now what was the name of your girlfriend again? I can't remember. Oh, okay, and then you go on. Clarifying. Other than that, they can kind of be conversation stoppers because where do you go from there? There's nothing else for the person to say. Now you have to direct the conversation someplace again because You have to ask another question to get them into something to talk. And so the questions that we generally try to stick to are more open questions, which are questions that have a little bit more freedom in their answer. What was it like, living, how do you feel about living in Mesa? What was it like growing up in wherever? Or, in counseling, we would always be, like, whoa, how can I help you today? Or if you're in, again, an organizational setting, kind of like, okay, so, where do we need to go with this decision that we're trying to make? Opening things up for a conversation. And we actually, when we're doing it, really just to open it up to a conversation, especially at the beginning of a conversation, we actually kind of call that door openers. So that's kind of like, okay, we're trying to lead into the conversation now. How do we get into it? But honestly, after you kind of open the door, you really don't need to ask many questions after that. I try to ask as few questions as possible. You try and go 10 minutes without asking a question. And what I do instead of asking questions, if I have to make a clarification about something, is I'll try to reflect. So, instead of asking someone, well, how do you feel about this? You say, well, it seems like you feel, upset about that, or passionate about this, or whatever it is. Instead of trying to just ask the person, how do you feel? Try and gauge from them, how do you think they feel? And that gives them a little bit, first of all, again, it helps them to know all the things we talked about, that you're really focusing on them and listening to them. But it also kind of gives them an opportunity to kind of expand on that a little bit more, feel like they can kind of move off of it. So use questions as sparingly as possible. And if you can, reflect instead of ask a question. Oops, skipped past that. So last step, number 5. Step number 1 was to attune. Number 2 was to reflect. Number 3, minimally encourage. Number 4, know when to ask questions. And number 5, I call it an advanced skill. It's not really that advanced. Containment. We need a containment crew here, right? No. It's not really that kind of containment. So what is containment? That one's kind of a fancy word. I think the best description, if I was to articulate it, would be to absorb what the other person is saying and feeling and give it back to them in a digestible way. Now, containment is kind of like reflection, but it's a little bit different. Now, when you think of reflecting something, you're thinking of a mirror. A mirror reflects, right? When I think of containment, I think of absorbing, which is not the same as reflecting, of course. You're taking it in. So you can think of it as like a mother bird who goes and eats the worm or whatever they eat, and then goes and chews it up a little bit and then gives it to her little birdies. She's taken it in, digested a little bit, and then given it back. Or what you do, you take in your food because she can't take in the food, and then you give it to her in milk. It's something more easily digestible. So what does that look like in an actual situation where you're talking to someone? Well, I think one of the easiest ways to kind of think about it in an actual conversation would be thinking of, if we'll skip on to the next one here, maybe it'll go, talking to like a 2-year-old. So if you can think of your favorite 2-year-old, it better be the one sleeping over there. So you think of a situation where, his older brother takes his toy. How does he respond to that situation? Oh dear, he's taken my toy. I feel so upset about that. No, of course he doesn't. He's throwing a fit. Most of the sometimes Matthew does kind of say, I feel sad, but most of the time it's like, and it's a tantrum. He's throwing a big fit. He's trying to express emotions he doesn't fully understand. And as adults, we can take that and we can say, wow, get down and let's say, wow, I can see that you're really, really upset, sad, a little bit angry because Timothy took your toy. You've lowered your voice. You've kind of taken in the feeling that he has, and you're giving it back to him in a calm, easy to digest way. Now, it's like I said, it's kind of like reflecting, but it's more than reflecting. You're trying to really take the emotion that he's feeling, something he's not able to express. It's too complicated for him to express, for him to know how to express it, to know how to verbalize it. And you're doing that for him on this calm, easy to say way. And that can apply to adults too. There are plenty of times where adults are in situations where we don't even we get so, feeling something that we don't understand the feeling. We can't express the feeling that we're feeling. And, thinking of, again, it's like a church situation. If you've got somebody coming into your church office who's just giving you feedback about something, but they're really angry about it, it's like, oh, wow, I can see you're really angry. You feel really passionate about this. Let's sit down and talk about it. All right. So you're kind of it's really a diffusing kind of tactic is what it is in a conversation. And it can be useful in conflict. It can be useful in, people who are giving angry feedback, those sorts of things. So it's containment. So that's the 5 of the 5 ones that we've got there, our steps 1 through 5. How do we practice these sorts of things? Well, first of all, Practice makes perfect. You do have to practice this stuff because nobody's, like I said, nobody's innately good at this stuff. You actually have to think about it while you're doing it. So practice it with your spouse, with your family, friends. As you get comfortable with people that are close to you, practice with your coworkers, with people that are, maybe a little bit further removed from your personal circle. Start by practicing with people that you really trust, because when you make mistakes, and you will, you're at least not going to ruin the relationship. It's like they're people who you can start doing this sort of stuff in trusting situations, and then move out. And ask for feedback. Just tell people, I've been really working on my listening skills. I'm just curious, like, how do you think I did? How did you feel? Did you feel heard? And people would love that. People would love to. Hey, yeah, did you feel heard in this conversation? And what is that? Oh yeah, observing others. So see how other people are doing. Not necessarily to observe what they're all necessarily doing right, because not everybody knows how to do this, but looking at situations where other people are talking and saying, that might have been a great situation where they could have reflected instead of asked a question or something like that. It really gets you just thinking about it in your everyday brain, so that you start to incorporate it just into your everyday conversations. And if there are any questions.
So with practice, you're actually saying you do like the reflection, and then say, hey, did I get up?
Well, but you might want to wait. Like, let's pretend if I would say, if it's a normal conversation and there's no conflict involved, yes, I would then say, hey, we just had this long talk. We've been talking for 20 minutes. How did I do? Like, type thing. But if you're having a discussion that's going to have,
you might want to wait till the next day.
You might wait till the next day.
Wait till the other person's upset
anyway, they're probably not going to give you positive feedback.
And to be honest, if you're in a situation where you have that kind of a conflict, if it's to the point where it's so heated or something like that you need to wait until the next day for everybody to call, you probably weren't doing it right.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that means somebody wasn't feeling heard. This has been the source of so many conflicts that we've had, where it's like, I that's why I said I was not very good at this. This was something I was particularly bad at, and I really did learn an awful lot from going to master's program in counseling. Learning from going to counseling, I had to go to counseling to get from learning about that sort of stuff, because, and I still get it wrong half the time, but it's like, it really has helped a lot. I
think the practice, like you said, because that containment one, your mom does so well with the kids,
she does,
and that's so hard for me. Like, when they go crazy, I don't contain very well at all. Like,
it's the difference between saying stop doing that, and getting, oh wow, it looks like,
yeah, and that's a really hard skill.
Yeah, well, that's why I called it an advanced skill.
Well, I think if you can do it with toddlers, I think then you can do it with adults.
I think that's probably true.
That's the place to start, because that's the hardest place to do it, because they're literally screaming, whereas adults don't usually scream.
Not usually, yeah. And it's a more complicated situation, that their feelings, that's true and it's not true. Their feelings are usually less complex, so they're easier to figure out. But they're also, because they're less complex, and we as adults have brains that can process that stuff much easier, it seems like, oh my gosh, why are you throwing a big fit over there? He just took, it's like, is it that big of a deal? Where that's kind of how we would think as an adult. And that's what makes it difficult to do, is that it's like, but I think that would be the same with any adult too. Like, seriously, like, why are you acting like a 2-year-old? That's what you think of to an adult. You'd say that, or not, hopefully you wouldn't say that to the adult, but it's like, you might think that about an adult. Like, why the heck are you acting like a 2-year-old? Because in our minds, that's really the difference. It's like, okay, am I going to be annoyed with you because you're acting this way, or am I going to try and diffuse this by containing it? So, yeah, no, that's why I said it was an advanced skill. It's advanced in the sense that it is difficult to do. It's not hard to understand, I guess. It can be difficult to do.
When you talk quite a bit about empathy, you were really still talking about attunement. Because when I thought empathy was like the second, number 2, and instead it was like, no.
Oh yeah, no, that's a part of attunement, and that's the base level of what you need to start with. Is attunement involves empathy, and like, so you can think of attunement as being kind of empathetic listening. So you're trying to be with the other person while they're speaking and focus 100% on them. You remove other thoughts from your mind. You're focused on them. You're not trying to give them advice. No. You're trying to just listen to them and hear what they're saying.
I like that, being in the hole. You're not asking them how to get out of the hole. You didn't offer them the ladder.
Exactly. You're not trying to give them advice on how do you get out. You're just being there with them. We watched this great clip about, in counseling, it was from a movie, and it was like they had this character, like all these different emotions were in cartoon form, and one of them was sadness, and sadness was really, really sad that they lost something that they really, really loved. And the happiness person, or no, it was the kid was like really, really sad they lost something they loved. And the happiness emotion character was like, oh, I'll cheer you up. It's okay. Come on. We're going to go. It'll be fine. And the sadness emotion character came, sat down next to him and said, wow, that really sucks. Like, I'm really sad that that happened. They weren't trying to fix it. They weren't trying to even make them feel better. They were just trying to be there with them. And that was that was a movie clip, but it's like, that's the idea. It's like, you're just trying to be there with them. You're not trying to fix it. You're not trying to give them advice. You're not even trying to tell a joke and make them feel better. You're just trying to be there with them so that so they have somebody with them to show them they're not alone. Yeah, right. So that's what attunement is all about. It's truly the base, the base of how to be a good listener is being with the person and not trying to fix things, Yeah, especially if you are talking to your wife.
Yeah.